Today we have Alison Cohen on the podcast. Hi, Allison. Welcome to the Unfulfilled Podcast.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for coming on. Diving right in, I would love for you to tell us about how you got into your coaching and self-development journey and what led you to where you are now.
Of course. So, I am a coach, a healer, and entrepreneur. I do a lot of social media, so that may be where you can find me. But I really began my journey with struggling with gut disorders and disordered eating. I was in college, and I think it was my freshman year, I started having a lot of symptoms, like IBS type symptoms. But at the time, like gut issues weren't really cool. It was no one talked about it. And so I had no idea what was going on with me. I was in a ton of pain. I was really bloated. And it really began to mess with my brain and my body image in ways that I think a lot of people don't necessarily talk about. I see a huge correlation just like in my practice and even with friends and family between having gut disorders and struggling with disordered eating. And so I tried all the things. I went to the GI doctor. I feel like of not getting any answers from the GI doctor and having to find an alternative path. So I ended up finding a functional doctor who helped me, and he put me on, it's called like the low FODMAP diet, which
Yeah.
yeah, which eased a lot of my symptoms, but really sort of perpetuated my disordered eating cycle of I was feeling so out of control of my life and my body at that time. And like, because I was having all these symptoms and I couldn't figure out how to stop bloating and actually feel normal again and feel like myself. So I really turned to controlling food and controlling my body and over exercising to feel back in control of my life. And focusing on lifestyle, focusing on exercising and eating right and going to this functional doctor did help me heal a lot. Like I definitely saw progress, and I definitely like the relief that came from that really made me passionate about alternative methods to health as opposed to just going to the regular doctor. And so the end of college, I ended up getting certified as a holistic health coach. And that was when I sort of started thinking about, okay, like I think I want to do something with helping people in the wellness space, especially with gut issues and disordered eating. But I definitely noticed like I hit a wall in terms of my healing journey. Like I was better and it was okay. But I was one, still really struggling with disordered eating thoughts and patterns. And two, I definitely still had a lot of the symptoms. They were just dialed down. And so right around COVID was when I sort of hit a rock bottom in my life mentally with the disordered eating. It was COVID. So like my social life didn't look the same. The guy I was with like ghosted me, which at the time I tied a lot of my worth to guys and relationships. I also didn't get a job offer at the internship I was in. And so I kind of just realized that I didn't know who I was. I didn't like who I was if I didn't have like external things to tie my confidence or my self-worth to. And so I started to really struggle, and I ended up seeking help and working with this spiritual coach therapist who completely changed my life. We worked on like self-love, self-worth, just healing all of the emotions that I had been storing in my body for so long without realizing it, like all the feelings of unworthiness and being unsafe and not being enough. And as I did that, I one saw my disordered eating patterns really begin to shift. And then two, I noticed as a result, because I wasn't putting so much stress and pressure and control into my body, my IBS symptoms actually started to relieve. And that's when I finally really healed fully. And so at the same time, I really fell in love with that type of work of really analyzing your emotions and how you're showing up in your life energetically and emotionally, and how really like being your authentic self and being in alignment with your sense of self-worth can truly change your life, your body, just like absolutely everything about you. And so that's when I really fell in love with coaching and knew I wanted to be like I started to have a feeling I wanted to be a full-time coach, but at the time I just was not prepared to do that. Like it takes a lot to be an entrepreneur, and to like a big thing for me has always been money. Like I find a lot of safety in money. I wanted to go into a full-time job. I got a really great offer at the end of college to work in private banking, which was like my dream job of the version of me 3 years prior. My dad works as a financial advisor, so I've always looked up to him and always thought that was a career that I would really excel in. But I went and did it and realized that it was not for me. And at the same time, like a lot of, again, I'm just someone who really stores a lot of my emotions in my body. So I started really struggling with burnout. I started having like chronic eczema on my face. And I started to notice like my body was deteriorating again because I was out of alignment with my authentic self, like with my sense of self worth. And that's when I really began to realize like I needed to change something. I needed to really work on myself enough to get to the point where I would be okay with leaving this job and be able to fully step into what I knew I wanted to do like a year or two prior. And so I, did all of the things to prepare myself to leave and saved up financially. All of that sort of just got clear on what I actually wanted to do. And then I ended up leaving my job to pursue coaching full time. So that's sort of like a snapshot of my long story.
Thank you so much for diving into all of that. I don't know about everyone listening, but I can resonate to absolutely everything that you just shared. So if you're listening and you also resonate, we're going to dive into all of this. So be sure to keep listening. All right, I definitely want to talk about your career transition later on and how you became an entrepreneur. But I would love to take a step back and dive a little bit deeper into your gut and disordered eating journey. You spoke to how you found a lot of positive resolution in healing your mind and how that impacted healing your gut and healing your disordered eating patterns. So, how did healing your mindset and starting on your growth journey impact your physical body?
Yeah. I mean, the mind body connection is insane. And I think a lot of people have also heard specifically like the brain gut connection is a big topic that is becoming more and more well known because I think more and more people are having gut issues and are looking for a solution and are finding that they go to the GI doctor and there's no real diagnosis. There's nothing that they can really give you to do. Like I ended up originally when I went, yes, I got diagnosed with IBS. I also got diagnosed with SIBO. And so the routine that they give you for that is to put you on antibiotics. So I did go on antibiotics twice and like it did provide temporary relief, but the same problems would resurface a couple of weeks later. And I just knew it wasn't the long term solution. And I think that so many of us, are like looking for these physical things to fix our gut, but so much of it is tied to the brain. Also, like a lot of it's really tied to our nervous system. So much of the stress that I think a lot of us hold is really related to the gut. Me personally, and what I find with a lot of women, so this is a little bit more like out there,
Oh, I'm here for
but
it. Let's go.
amazing. So there's like I don't know if you know them. They're pretty like well known, but like the chakras. Have you heard of
Yes. I'm
chakra? Like,
actually a yoga instructor.
oh, amazing! I love that.
Know all
Yeah.
about those
So
chakras.
yeah, all about the chakras. So they're basically like the energy centers of our body, and the solar plexus, which is right around the gut area, is our place of personal power and self worth. And I was even just thinking about this today. I was like, I feel like I know so many women who struggle with gut issues. And yes, I know men that struggle with gut issues, but it's just not to the same extent.
Right.
And I really believe it's because, women in general, like we grow up in a society where we are told that we have to prove our worth and we're told, we're not given the same sense of power in a lot of ways and personal power that I think, some men do have the privilege of experiencing. And so for me, I really found that as I healed my self-worth specifically, and really I actually did a lot of like solar plexus chakra work with the person I was working with, like just simple things, even like using crystals, eating yellow foods, wearing yellow because the solar plexus is the yellow chakra.
Well, I was gonna
Um,
ask, what's the yellow?
yeah, because it's like yellow. They're all like different colors as you go
Oh,
up.
well,
Yeah.
I didn't
So
know
like
that
just
part. That's so cool.
yeah. And affirmations, like I did all of the affirmations
Yeah.
and I would do a meditation like a couple of times a week on healing and rebalancing solar plexus chakra. And so I think a lot of times it's really deeply tied to that and our energy is off. What happens is, our gut holds so much bacteria, all of these things. A lot of it's really tied to the immune system. And you know, when we experience something that can sort of put our gut out of whack. So maybe you like have neurovirus, or maybe you get exposed to a parasite, or maybe your immune system's just weakened because you're exposed to toxins or something. If your energy is and your emotions are sort of not in a place where your immune system can't function optimally, that can wreak havoc on the whole system. So our body wants to heal itself naturally, but if you are storing emotions in your gut, you're not feeling worthy, you are have this lack of personal power and like lack of energy there to really create the healing that is needed, like it will then spiral into something so much bigger. And it's like you just need that one small thing to offset like the deeper issue, which is really energetic or emotional. And so as I did that work and really found my sense of self-worth again, I noticed a big difference. A lot of it for me too was releasing control. So going back to nervous system regulation, like when we are controlling things, it's because we feel unsafe. It's because we feel like the control is like we're using control as a mechanism to feel safe and to regulate ourselves. And so as I really began to feel safe in myself and who I was and put myself in environments where and just like releasing the need to control my body, I think that one of the biggest shifts that really for me made a big change was beginning to view my body as my friend and
Mm.
not my enemy. I think that especially, and this is one of the big reasons why I think people who have gut issues tend to spiral into disordered eating, is because you begin to view your body as like your enemy, or like you have to fight against your body. It's like you believe that you have different, almost like your body's sick and you want it to get better because it's so painful and so uncomfortable. But realizing that these symptoms that are coming up, the discomfort that's coming up, is truly just signaling to you there's something wrong. We need your attention. We want to work with you to get better, was really when I began to see a big shift, because I was no longer trying to fight against my body and try to like control and restrict it in order to make it better. I was realizing like, no, we're on the same team, and I can actually use those signals, those symptoms as like the roadmap to getting me to where I want to get to, which was a healthier body, a healthier gut. And as I did, I was able to recognize, okay, like maybe this person in my life is making me feel unworthy constantly. And I noticed that I have a flare up when I'm with them, or maybe when I am super stressed at work or putting a lot of pressure on myself at work, I notice I'm getting flare ups, and really using it as sort of the information that you need to figure out what are the things that are causing flare-ups, what are the things that aren't serving my body, and how can I shift more into like my authentic self, from living from a place of self-worth, and really engaging in the activities, eating the foods, exercising in ways that really feel good to my body, so that it feels safe enough to actually heal, because your body naturally should be able to heal by itself. So it's what are the blocks that are in your life that are preventing you from naturally healing?
I literally have chills because I resonated so much with that. Thank you for bringing all of that up. I've experienced my fair share of gut issues and disordered eating as well. And I so agree. I think the message that's sent is, if we struggle with digestion, the answer is to restrict. The answer is to go on low FODMAP and to cut out all of
Mhm.
these things. And so I tried that. And what it causes is, as you mentioned, it creates these thoughts in our heads that tell us this is good, this is bad, this is yes, this is no. It's this black and white thinking, which I think only makes things worse, because it's just making you more restrictive and lean more into that idea of control. I found when I was trying to overcome gut issues as well, I would just lean towards more control and more restriction. Okay, if I just eat super, super healthy and super, super clean, then the gut issues will go away. But I've had a similar realization in that I think that my gut issues was because I was like holding this stress and tension in my gut. I don't really even know from what, but I think, as you mentioned, we just hold so much in our gut. But what isn't talked about, as you said, is what we're holding our emotions or deep seated things that we're not letting be released through us in authentically expressing ourselves. And I think the answer we go to is what can we physically change about our diet rather than what can we energetically and emotionally change. And so I think this is a really important conversation to be having and work that you're doing. And I'm going to need the number of that person that you worked with so that I can contact them.
Of course.
So I love that you shared how your gut improved with your healing journey. Could you speak a little bit more about your disordered eating patterns, how those started, and how you overcame them?
Yes. I mean, now looking back on it, since it obviously sort of snowballed and it became a big thing, I can recognize now that they honestly did start in high school. I remember like packing a really small sandwich and trying to hold off as long as possible for eating it. Like I definitely always struggle with this like lack mindset of the longer I can hold off, the more I'll be rewarded. So this was a big mindset thing that I needed to shift that obviously sort of just got highlighted and when I was in college and when I had these gut issues, I didn't mention but sort of prior to developing the gut issues, I also experienced some rejection in my life. I didn't get into the sorority that I wanted, which now seems so silly. But for me at the time, like that was a big rejection. And so I felt really out of control of my life. And then when it started to manifest in my body, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm literally so out of control. And so I really began to really, this was even before I think I got diagnosed with IBS or SIBO, but I started to eat super clean, over exercise. Like over exercising was really big for me because actually what was happening was that I wasn't going to as many social events as I wanted to go to. And I am someone who has struggled with very like work hard, play hard, burnout type mindset in the past. And so I was like, if I'm not doing something socially, I need to be doing something productive.
Yeah.
And so that for me, a lot of times, like I remember there would be a couple of Friday nights where if I couldn't go to one of the parties or something, like I would go and just run a couple of miles. And I was like, okay, well, at least I did that to feel better about myself. So a lot of it was over exercising and then a lot of it was super restrictive. And then to your point, it was like everything you said I completely resonate with as well was yeah, once I went on that low FODMAP diet, it became very like orthorexia, like everything needs to be as clean as possible. If I eat one thing that's outside of that diet, that means that all my progress towards healing my gut and controlling my gut to try to heal would all go down the drain. Like I
Yeah.
had such fear of eating the wrong thing and then experiencing symptoms for days after or it messing up all of my progress. And that stress is probably what caused so many of the reactions. Like once I realized that I had eaten something that I shouldn't have eaten, the stress of having just done that and like that being in my body now is probably what caused so much of the discomfort
Yeah.
afterwards. So
Yeah.
it was really, yeah, to your point, like it's such a cycle. And you think that restricting more, yeah, like I would get, and then I would get so crazy about like, then I realized once, oh, this is candida overgrowth right now that's going on. So I went on this special candida diet, which cut out even more stuff. Or then when I would have flare ups, I would cut out even more stuff because this is the couple of things I know won't hurt my stomach.
Yeah.
And so it was like the more that I experienced the symptoms, the more I would control to try to gain back control of my body. And the more I felt out of control, the more I fell into a lack or scarcity mindset. And the more, honestly, that I did experience symptoms because I was so stressed and I was putting so much pressure on myself to be so perfect in this aspect of my life. And that's really how it manifested for me. I always say like I'm very lucky because it got really bad at one point, like right after freshman year. And I had been away from my family for a month. I was actually working in Nantucket at a like yacht club. So I got housing there and I was away from my family. And then they all came. And I remember them saying, I remember my sister saying things to me, my mom saying things to me, like really concerned. And I had such like body dysmorphia at the time, I really thought I looked good. Like I really thought that skinny looked good. And then I just remember having this moment where I looked in the mirror and I was like, whoa, I don't look good. Like I look
Yeah.
very concerning. And I'm so grateful I had that moment of like realization, because that was definitely a big turning point for me in terms of I did start to consciously try to gain back weight, but there was still like before I actually really healed the deep rooted issues, I was still playing into so much control. So even though I got to a good weight, and I think a lot of people don't talk about this either, it's like just because you look healthier, you look good, doesn't mean that the thought patterns aren't continuing. And I would still be, it was like I still wanted to control myself. It was like I could be a certain weight, but I didn't want to go over that. So like I would eat a lot to make sure that I was that specific weight on the low FODMAP diet, but then I would make sure that I wasn't eating enough almost to get over that. So it was still just really controlling my food, it being so much of my day. And really, when I look back now, it's so crazy to think that I even operated like that, because I was hungry so much of the day. I feel like now when I look at, I was like watching a show the other day, and I was like, there was this girl who like, it looked like, she hadn't been necessarily eating enough. And she worked like this big job, and I was just like, I can't imagine working a big important job and being able to operate at the level that you need if you're not fueling your body correctly. It's so crazy, and it's so sad for me to look at. I have so much like compassion for people, and I because I remember like how hard it was to focus and concentrate when you're really hungry. And people, I think, don't talk about that enough, how like disordered eating is in so many ways preventing you from playing big and living up to your potential, because it takes up so much of your brain space, it takes up so much of your energy. And it makes me so sad to think about, and I'm just so grateful that I was able to get to a point where I was able to fully heal from that and can put other things in my life before what I'm eating in the
Right.
next meal.
Exactly. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing all of that. I'll share a little bit about my experience as well, because I had a very similar one. Mine kind of happened, I would say my thought patterns probably started in high school as well, because also like you're just surrounded by, like mean girls, and like you're just insecure, and like of course it starts in high school. Maybe even earlier for some people, but probably that's when I remember it. But I would say my true disordered eating patterns started going to like senior year of college. And it's so crazy that everything's linked. Like senior year of college is when I was like definitely pretty unhappy. And with that, I was trying to control what I ate. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm not happy, maybe I can at least control what I eat. And of
Mhm.
course, with that, like I was holding a lot of stress and unhappiness in my gut. So then my gut also was probably really bad. I think my gut was bad all through college because I was probably like holding a lot there. But like it all, like when it rains, it pours. Because as we were saying at the beginning of the call, our mind, our body, our energy, it is all connected. And if you're feeding into the disordered eating thoughts, or if you're leaning into that restriction, or if you're kind of falling down that rabbit hole of unhappiness and depressive thoughts, they're all kind of going to trickle in. At least that's what I've experienced. That was definitely when I experienced all of those things. And similar to you, I had people making comments to me, and it really upset me because I thought I looked, I thought I looked good, because you don't really see it super clearly. And I remember for a while, I would like almost want to prove to people like, no, look, like I'm eating these like French fries or something. It's like eating for other people, which like also really didn't feel good and wasn't like, that was still, I think, when I was like exiting the patterns, I was almost like trying to prove myself to others. I don't know if you experienced that also, but it's just like that was still very much in it, because I was like, I still want to do the controlling thing and the restrictive thing, but but like they're going to make comments. So I have to prove that I'm going to like eat more for them or something, just prove that I'm okay. Because I almost felt like when people would make comments to me, I'd be like, what do you think, I'm broken or something? Do you think there's something wrong with me, or that I'm like flawed? And it's hard when people make comments to you, but people just do it because they want you to be healthy and happy and care about you. And now I'm very much at a place where like I would never eat to prove something to someone else. Like it feels really good to be in that confident, secure place where no, I'm going to eat when I'm hungry to fuel my body, because I know that's like the point of eating. It's not to prove a point, it's not to send a message. Food isn't a weapon, it's fuel. And so looking back, it makes me sad that food did consume a lot of my headspace for a lot of the day. If I knew I had a social plan coming up, I'd look at the menu first, or like would be worried about, like how drinking impacts the gut and the control and ruins it all that. So it is really hard. And I do think it's really important to have these open and vulnerable conversations, especially, being two people who have experienced it ourselves, because you do have a lot of clarity on the other side of it. But it's really hard to see it in the moment. And it's also hard to want to admit that maybe you have disordered eating thoughts, but every single person has them. Whether you think you have like more of an eating disorder or just like some thoughts that trickle in, we live in a society where food is seen as such a good or a bad thing. It's become such a polarized thing. It's like politics. It's, oh, you should eat that and you shouldn't eat that. And it's constantly changing. And so we're constantly fed these thoughts of what's good and bad. And that's only going to add to our disordered eating. And so I hope that anyone listening can hopefully relate to that and start to see some clarity there. So we started talking a little bit about corporate America. You started your journey in corporate America and you experienced burnout. What was that like and how did you know it was time for you to step away from that?
Yeah. So I'm pretty intuitive and just like very, by this point in my life, this is after I'd sort of done a lot of the work, like very in touch with myself and my body. And so I would say about 2 months in, I knew I had to leave. Like I was like, this is not for me. But at the same time, I knew I have this thing, this happens to me all the time, where it's like I know I have to leave something or I know that something's not for me long term, but I have to almost see it out to fully be able to learn the lesson and let it go. And so I really sort of felt like if I just left this job at 2 months, one, like financially, it just didn't make sense. But two, I wouldn't have gotten the clarity and the closure I needed from that. I think I probably would have just jumped into a similar job at a different company or with a slightly different sort of job title or like responsibilities, whatever it is. And so I knew really quickly that that it wasn't for me. And I think it was right around that point. I mean, I was always just exhausted. Like, I am someone who prioritizes my health and my wellness. And like, me and my dad are actually both like this, where working out does really impact our mindset and like how we can show up. So I really do. If I don't work out a couple of times a week, like, I'm just not going to be my best self. And I know that about me. So I was really trying to fit in all my wellness stuff into living this corporate life. And I mentioned this to you before, but like I was working 12-ish hours a day and meal prepping on top of that every single day, working out most days, trying to have some sort of social life. Like it just did not all fit. And I need a lot of sleep. So it just, none of it, there was not enough time in the day for me. And like right around that point of like 2 months, maybe it was 3 months, I remember I was like in the office one day and all of a sudden like my whole face started just getting really hot and I thought I was like getting a fever or something. And I ended up just breaking out eczema on my cheeks. And then it was like every Thursday, right around, because that would be like right when my body would kind of hit, I think, the point of like exhaustion, I would just break out in eczema on my cheeks. And it was so frustrating because, as you know, this is after I had all of these gut issues. So I'm very, I, when stuff happens with my body, one, I know it's like a sign that something's really off, but two, it's a little bit triggering to me. It's very, when I feel out of control of my body, like it is really triggering to me. So that was like something that really made me be like, okay, like I want to get out of here.
Were you still
Um,
battling those disordered eating thoughts at this point, or had you kind of pushed past that part of your journey?
yeah, so this is so interesting. And this just goes to show like how just the way that you're living your life has such a big impact on how you're able to show up. But I really, before I started working at that job, I had felt like I'd really moved past a lot of those thoughts. And I definitely, when I started working again in corporate and was in a really high stress environment where I didn't feel in control of my time, and I like to say it was like a lot of the internal mindset patterns that I had been experiencing my whole life were almost like reflected to me in that job, like the work hard, play hard, not having to earn rest, like, or not really being able to rest, all of so much, it's so much based on like external validation and reward and like sucking up to people. And it was just a lot of those patterns were almost being like reflected to me. And so I did find myself being a little bit more restrictive, I think, in that place because I just felt a little bit more out of control of my life. But it wasn't to the same extent. Like I do say that like when it comes to disordered eating, like 90% of the battle is your behavior. So, yeah, there are going to be moments. We live in a society, to your point, where food is so villainized and we're encouraged to double think what we're eating and what that's going to do to our bodies. And to it's I think it's also important to almost normalize that people every once in a while are allowed to have disorder, like a more restrictive thought, but it's like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
And so at that time, I think I was having more of the thoughts, but I was still very good about being like, what I eat doesn't mean anything about me. I can have whatever I want. So I think the thoughts got a little bit worse and maybe some of the behavior shifted a little bit, but I was in a much better place.
I love that you
Yeah.
brought that up and that we're not our thoughts. And I think that's a really important reminder to share with everyone. If you have restrictive thoughts, if you have negative thoughts, anything that would be perceived as like harmful thinking, you can't control what thoughts come up. What you can control is the thoughts that you decide to counter them with or your actions. And so I love that you suggested that because I will admit 100%, I still have disordered thoughts that come up fairly often, but I just don't act on them. Or I remind myself, no, Camille, like that's like an old way of thinking and that's untrue. And so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. Totally. Yeah. And I also have thoughts come into my mind. Oh, how many calories is that?
Yeah,
That
we're
doesn't
not
mean I go
perfect.
and check the calories. It's like how, and a big part of it too is, yeah, one is the behavior and two is the how you hold yourself through the thought. So are you meeting yourself with judging yourself and shaming yourself for having that thought, which actually almost makes you begin to identify with it? Or do you meet yourself with love and compassion and understand that you're a human and that to your point, your thoughts aren't who you are? You're so much more than that. And that's what allows you to really move through it. And a lot of my coaching practice in general is really based on the idea of healing to change in behavior, not like a change in your thoughts. And it's when you wake up to your thoughts that you're able to change your behavior. But yeah, like that doesn't mean that you don't sometimes have thoughts that come in that you're like, why would that come in?
Yeah.
Like, why did I
Yeah.
have that?
And then I find that you prove the thinking wrong when, for example, like you eat something that you had a negative thought about and you're like, oh, actually, like that tasted really good and my gut is fine and the world didn't explode. The thought loses power when you counter it with action, you know?
Totally, 100%. And actually, I would say that during that time when I was in corporate, my gut issues did flare up again. That was the bigger thing that sort of flared up again. I just remember it wasn't as bad, but I had a couple of random instances where I just had a debilitating episode where I was like, I have to stay home from work
Yeah.
because it was that bad, but that was just from the stress and the pressure I was putting on myself in that job. And then I talked to my coach, my therapist, and we sort of decided that I should stay for a year. So I stayed for a year. And then right around the year mark, I had hit my goal in terms of how much money I wanted to have saved up. But I still was like scared to leave, to be honest. And I think it's good to sort of normalize that. It's really scary to leave a corporate job. Everyone makes it seem, especially on social media. I get very frustrated with the way that entrepreneurship is portrayed on social media because it's
Yeah.
just so inaccurate.
Yeah.
But it's so scary to leave a stable job, especially when that's the job that my dad has and that's the job that my dad was so proud of me for getting and like all these things. That was where like so many of my friends in the city were from my job because I spent all of that time there. Like I had a whole community there. Like I would go into work and have all these people who like I enjoyed really being with,
Yeah.
and I was giving all of that up, and it was really scary and I wasn't ready for that. And I sort of had something happen in my life that woke me up out of sort of the continuing to just go down like unconsciously this path. And I am really grateful for that experience. It was like not an easy experience, but I'm still so grateful that happened because that experience that happened that kind of woke me up and was like, you need to like save yourself from this life that you're living. Like you're allowing other people and money to determine like what you're doing with your life and how happy you are and how much you're able to show up as your full authentic self. And that's not going to work anymore. and I really got the message. And so after that, I ended up actually moving home because it had to do with my lease. So I ended up moving home to the suburbs of New York, and I kept commuting into the city for I think another 6 months. So I ended up staying for a whole like year and 7 months, I think. And then after I got my bonus, I left.
Wise move. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's leaving the safety net of something as secure as stable financial security, as a community of coworkers, of friends who are doing the exact same thing. That takes a tremendous amount of bravery and strength and courage, and definitely isn't easy. So good for you for listening to that and leaning into that. What did
Thank
your
you.
next steps look like when you exited? How did you even know where to go next?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a crazy journey and process. I'm so grateful for what ended up happening because I was at home, and so there was definitely a lot less pressure on me because I wasn't paying rent. And so at the time, I was like really burnt out. Like I had the eczema, I had a lot more like acne. I just was so exhausted, like just such a dysregulated nervous system. And so I definitely took a couple of months to start things up, make my LLC, just do some of the basic groundwork for my business. But I gave myself honestly like a little bit of a rest because I knew that I couldn't show up fully for my business until I really healed from burnout. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that. I know not everybody like gets that same opportunity. Then I actually ended up investing in a business coach, and she was great. She was really helpful. I think that as an entrepreneur, like having a roadmap when you first start is really helpful because a lot of times the lack of clarity is like your block as a new entrepreneur. It's like because you don't know what to do next, you'll just sort of start procrastinating. You'll just do a bunch of random things that don't make any like forward movement. And so I do think it was really helpful to have just a little bit of a framework going forward. And I started just like posting on social media every day. I had been doing it at my job, but I tailored it more towards my coaching. I got more clear on my offer, what I wanted to do. I got some like additional training and just like background, and I worked on my business for like almost 6 months or so, maybe a little over before I even got my first client.
Yeah.
And then I got my first client, and it was actually like through someone that I knew. And I think the second client I had was also through someone I knew. A lot of what we see on social media of, oh, this is how you run an online business, this is how you start an online business. I think it works for a lot of people, but I think that not enough people realize that like there before there was the internet, there was also you could still be an entrepreneur by doing stuff in your community. And I do think that sometimes that actually is more impactful. Like it's actually really hard to build trust on social media if
Yeah.
you're charging a certain amount of money for your services. And so I really found that yes, posting on social media as like a way to reach more people and also almost like a website in some ways was great, but I also found it's really important, and like I'm definitely leaning into this more right now as well, of finding the people in your community who need your help and giving that to them and allowing them to like be able to really provide feedback on your services and also like testimonials and stuff like that because you need a lot of that to even get the people on social media. So it was a combination of reaching out to people I already knew and then also using social media. And
Yeah.
it's definitely been a journey. Like I think people don't talk about it enough. Things work differently for different people, and like everyone has a different zone of genius, and everyone has a different purpose. And so the way that somebody else got famous or rich or whatever it is likely not going to be the same for you. And so it's really important to be like open to trying a lot of new things.
Yeah.
And that's also why like really being able to save money before you jump into entrepreneurship can be really helpful because it gives you opportunity to like experiment with a lot of things. Because if I didn't have that safety net, I think I would have just been like pushing myself way too hard, not being open to trying new things, like needing the answer. And because I have financial safety net a little bit, like it's allowed me to really come at my business and begin my business and operate my business from a way that really felt aligned and successful to me, like on a deeper level than just like external success.
Absolutely. Couple things I want to touch on there. I love that you shared that the difficult experience that eventually led you to leaving corporate I love how you look back on it with gratitude. You're like, I'm so grateful that happened. And it just emphasizes how time and time again the universe proves that it's the difficult moments, it's the hard experiences, those times that feel really uncomfortable in the moment. That's when you grow and that's when your life transforms the most. And so if someone's going through something right now that feels really hard, just know that you're going to look back in this moment with gratitude. And so thank you for sharing that perspective. And so true that it is such a journey trying to build something from the ground up. And I think that's why a lot of us feel so inclined to cling to that corporate job, right? Because, like you said, you don't just have a roadmap that's take this step and then take that step and then XYZ till you get to step Z and then you're successful. That's not how it works. There's a lot of risk involved. You have to financially save up and all the things. And so you were able to go move home and have that stability of not having to pay rent. And that did take some pressure off. And I think, too, it's important to send the reminder you don't have to leave the corporate job right away. Something I talk about a lot is start it on the side. Like side hustles are so common nowadays because it doesn't have to be all or nothing. But like you said, trying new things is so important because you can get all the coaches you want, but you have to figure out like your life, and that takes trial and error. It takes bravery. It takes guts. So anyone who has an urge to try something, just start it on the side or maybe save up. Like you said, it is important to consider realistic things like financial stability because social media doesn't portray that very realistically. So, in this journey of leaving corporate, two more questions for you. How did this personal growth journey, all that you've gone through, how has it helped you to step outside of your comfort zone? And what advice do you have for others to step outside of their comfort zone and take a risk?
Yeah, of course. I love to say that entrepreneurship is literally just like your personal development journey on drugs. Like it's it's
100%.
every day you're just given something that's reflecting to you a pattern that's not serving you and you have to figure out how to deal with it. And I've really found during this time like when I was towards the end of corporate and stuff, I had let go of a lot of the support that I had in terms of my personal development because I felt like I was at a really good place in my life because I was in this honestly like a comfortable, even though it was like physically uncomfortable, it was like comfortable to the patterns that I had been playing into my whole life, if that makes
Mm,
sense. It's like all the familiar patterns. So I felt very safe in that environment. And then once I started being an entrepreneur full time, I have made sure to up the amount of support that I have in terms of my personal development.
yeah,
And I think that for a while, a little bit of what you were saying before, I kind of thought the answer was in business coaches. And I've realized that there's a time and place for them. There's a lot of great business coaches out there, but that for the day to day as an entrepreneur, like the help that you need is personal development
yeah,
because there's so many times throughout your day, your week, that you will want to just kind of quit, give up, procrastinate, not take that risk, not put yourself out there in that way because it's always scary. Like all of us have some degree of fear of failure. It all comes from the humans need to belong. Like we're biologically programmed to belong to a tribe. And so putting yourself out there, playing big, like really stepping outside of your comfort zone is scary to everyone on a biological level because it in theory threatens your abilities to survive and to be in a tribe. And so really I've sort of upped my support in terms of personal development and I think it's really the thing that's gotten me here also. Like I have really upped my spiritual practices. I honestly don't know how people are entrepreneurs without being spiritual
yeah,
because it provides so much safety and just like no just like some of those like really classic like spiritual beliefs is like trusting the journey. Yeah, the universe is always supporting you. It's always going to help you get to where you want to get to as long as you're in alignment with your most authentic self. Like all of those things provide me with so much relief and safety, and they allow me to come at my business from a place that actually feels good instead of all this pressure and anxiety all the time. And if I didn't have my spiritual practices, I just feel like I would be a mess all of the time, like wondering when the next dollar was coming in, when I'm going to get the next client. Like, why did I put myself out there in this way and nobody showed up? Like, this stuff happens all of the time. And it really like spirituality for me and like a lot of the other spiritual entrepreneurs I talk to say the exact same thing. It gets you through everything, like it grounds you through everything. And there's always a practice you can come back to, like meditation or grounding or going for a walk or yoga, like whatever works for you that you can come back to when your mind is racing to sort of calm you down and remind you you're still alive, you're still okay, it's going to be okay. And clarity on what you really want. I think if you don't have clarity on what you want, it's going to be hard to have the motivation to step outside of your comfort zone. And so, really understanding what is that external thing that you want, and then understanding almost like the underlying desire for that. So, for example, like I want to start my own business because I want more freedom and I want to show up more authentically in my life. And really using that, like I like to say, you don't want to be pushing yourself towards your goals, like having to put all this pressure on yourself and constantly be reminding yourself you want like your vision and your desires to be pulling you so that you
Yeah.
don't have to do as much work. And so when you have a clear vision and a clear purpose and a clear reason why you're working for something, it comes so much more naturally. And then working through the blocks, like what is blocking you, like it's okay to have fear of failure. It's okay to be really scared about doing something that is scary. And for me, honestly, it comes down to the support that I have and the ways that I'm able to really look at what is this block that's coming up for me, what pattern from my past is being played out right now, and how do I meet myself in that space and allow that part of me that feels really scared stepping up in this way to return to safety and to feel loved and safe and validated by me first, and then regulating myself and then figuring out, okay, now how do I get to that next step? How do I sort of break this pattern and realize that it was just a pattern, like almost like how we're talking about it's just a thought, it's just a pattern, it's not who you are. And you always have a choice whether or not you want to play into that pattern again or you want to step outside of it. And a lot of it comes down to how safe do you feel stepping outside of that pattern. And so a lot of the inner work, especially that I do with my clients, is about creating safety within yourself so that you have the courage to do the things that are really scary. Because when you're sourcing a lot of love or safety or validation from people and external things, your actions are going to directly affect how much love or safety or validation you can receive. And so when you really do the work to learn how to insource a lot of that stuff, those courageous actions are still so courageous, but they're way less scary and they're way less dysregulating to your nervous system. And so your body has the ability to actually show up in that way for you.
I love that. We have to find something bigger than ourselves, right? Our why and our spirituality, whatever connection it is that you find to motivate you, it's going to be bigger than yourself. So I feel like on this podcast journey as well, my why has to be bigger than those days that I don't have the motivation. You know, it's the spirituality, those practices that you were saying. It's always what I have to come back to. And so I totally resonate with that in that any endeavor we go on is how we grow. We grow through action and we grow through taking the risks. We build resilience along the way. And so creating something, trying something new, stepping outside your comfort zone is genuinely how you grow. So thank you for sharing that. I couldn't agree more. Final question. For anyone who is experiencing those gut issues, those disordered eating patterns, those feelings of stress and burnout that they're holding within, because we've spoken to how it's all connected. And so I'm sure a lot of the listeners can relate to a lot of those things. What is your advice for anyone who's experiencing those things? Parting words.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is a biased opinion, but I would definitely recommend getting help and getting support. One of the reasons why it's so powerful and so helpful is if you think about in a job, if somebody tells you to do this specific thing for this specific type of project, like it's really hard to figure out how to do it if you haven't done it before. Or you could have the person who's been there for 2 years come show you how to do it. And like within 5 minutes, you've already done it, you've become so much better at it. You can do it on your own so much more quickly now. It's sort of like that. And so I really do think like there are a lot of small practices that you can do 100%, like meditation, yoga, going for walks, eating healthier. There are all those practices, but it really does come down to like support in terms of how quickly you're going to get there. And I think the most important thing to recognize, and I think this is really hard for a lot of people in our generation and living in this time, but is to recognize it's a long journey. It's a process.
Yeah.
And you have to be really willing to try a lot of different things, experiment with a lot of different modalities, and figure out like what's your medicine, who is your person that can help you, what are the particular practices that can help you. And that comes from trying a million different things. Like I've tried it all. I've tried so many different things, and I now know what stuff works really well for me when a specific issue comes up, because I've tried it all and I've seen there's stuff that has worked really well for other people I know and it just didn't work for me. And then there's stuff that I know if I do this, it will have this impact. It will help me show up in this way. And so I think it really does come down to getting support and being open to getting support and getting help with those things, and recognizing that, that healing journey may not look how you thought, and it may not be the reason you're experiencing these symptoms, you're experiencing these struggles may not be from something that you would have expected. It could be something completely different. And really looking into, on a holistic level, like how are you treating your body? What does your lifestyle look like? And then how are you treating your mind and yourself? And really just looking at those things, and anything that feels like it could be a little off, looking deeper into that and really beginning to sort of connect the dots, like our mind, body, soul, it's all interconnected. And so when one of those is off, it can throw everything else off. And so being open to really connecting the dots in terms of, okay, if there's this issue in my mind, could this be impacting my gut? Or if I'm experiencing this issue in my gut, could this also be impacting the mind, right? Or could that be impacting the way I'm able to show up energetically and like authentically in my life on a sort of soul level? And so really being open to looking at the system in a more holistic way, and then getting the support that you need to really help you heal and really just allow yourself to be the best version of you and show up authentically and live the healthiest, best life.
So well said. Thank you so much, Allison. I feel so inspired and excited by all of this, and I hope everyone listening does as well. Where can everyone find you if they want more from you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at transform with an E at the end underscore coaching. You can also find me at transform with an E at the end dash coaching.com. Yeah, those are sort of the two main places that you can find me. And I am so excited. If you reach out to me from this podcast, definitely let me know. And I would be happy to chat with you about anything that I discussed.
Perfect. And I'll link that all in the show notes. Allison, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.